Revolutionary greetings, comrades. It's Red Sunday. It's the 20th of October 2024. We continue discussing what is to be done in the Zimbabwean context. In the first video, we spoke about point number 1, building a mass movement rooted in the ideals of the liberation struggle. Point number 2, which we also recorded in our last video, we said use social media as a tool of mobilizing the mass of the people. Point 3, which is our focus for this video, is intensify political education. Point 4, which we look next time, is build unit amongst the mass of the people. The last point which we are going to discuss in what is to be done is building a strong international solidarity movement amongst the progressive forces. So our focus is in what is to be done. Intensify political education. This is point number 3. We have said point number 1, build a mass movement rooted in the ideals of the liberation struggle. Point number 2, use social media as a tool of mobilizing the mass of the people. Point number 3, intensify political education. Comrade Lenin giving a lecture in 1905 on the lecture on revolution. He says, I quote, and that is Comrade Vladimir Lenin. He says, I quote, the real education of the masses can never be separated from their independent political and especially revolutionary struggle. Only struggle educates the exploited class. Only struggle discloses to it the magnitude of its own power, widens its horizon, enhances its abilities, clarifies its mind, forges its will, close quote. This is key. And he continues when Lenin outlines the task of the youth leagues or young communist leagues. He says, I quote, I must say that the task of the youth in general and of the young communist leagues and all other organizations in particular might be summed up in a single word, learn, close quote. He wrote this in 1920 when Comrade Lenin was defining or clarifying the task of the Young Communist League. So when we talk of intensifying political education, what is it that we are learning? What is it that we take to the people as part of the education? Because it's key to understand. So we have listed 11 points, which we'll not discuss in detail because of time. But we have listed 11 points that are key in political education, because you now have the mass movement, right? If we go in terms of how we've arranged these points and what is to be done, the 5 points, we have now established a mass movement rooted in the ideals of the liberation struggle, right? Secondly, in terms of strategy and tactics, we are now using, which we discussed in the last video, social media as a tool of mobilizing the mass of the people. What is the message that you then communicate to the people? This is what we call political education. What is it that the people must learn? So there are 11 points. The first point that we must learn is the ideology. It is key. We have a material where we've defined ideology in simple terms, ideology being a set of political ideas. It's important that we define the ideology. We must educate people about the importance of the ideology, because the economic program is linked to the ideology of the mass movement. So the first point is ideology. The second point, which is key, We might take it for granted. But this is a serious issue which we must educate the masses about. It is colonialism. What is colonialism? What effects did it have in our society? So it is important that part of our education is to give a lecture on colonialism. Why were we colonized? The third point that is critical that we must discuss is imperialism. What is imperialism? When we say we want to build an economy outside the influence of imperialist forces, what do we mean? This must be contained in our educational booklet, imperialism. So it's important that we must define what imperialism is. If we're designing, which Comrade Ian Bidos always does with the trade unions in Zimbabwe, is that our trade unions, social movements, and the other organized formations must understand what imperialism is. Number 4, it is key that we start class struggle. It is key that we must educate the people about class struggles, because there are some who would say, let us go back to a feudal society. In the name of culture, in the name of tradition, because people seem not to understand. They do not understand that even under feudalism, at least 2 classes existed. So it's important that when we talk of political education, point number 4 is to clarify class struggles. Point number 5, it's important that we study the history of our liberation struggle. Why did our parents, those before us, pick up arms against the oppressors? I posted in my Facebook page, I will post that map here. It's a map which shows how Africa was colonized, the countries that colonized Africa. And the comments are saying, no, it was better when we're under colonialism than now. So it's important that part of our political education is to educate the mass of the people about the history of the liberation struggle and why it is critical that we complete the liberation. As we say in our program, that complete the liberation of Zimbabwe. Point number 6, we must, in our educational material, include and pay attention to neo-colonialism. It's key. We've discussed neo-colonialism, which will not deal with it here in detail, but it is important that when we say intensify political education, neo-colonialism is a subject that must be studied. Of course, the next point, we must study the Zimbabwe Communist Party program. It's important. Study the constitution of the Zimbabwe Communist Party, which obviously will take you to the ideology question, which will also take you to the question of class struggles, because the constitution and the program clarifies that. So it is important that the Zimbabwe Communist Party program is studied. The next point, the whole relationship between the workers and the political party. Because the assumption which we must clarify is that the workers in Zimbabwe established in 2000 a political movement called the MDC, and the MDC was a movement of the workers. So it's important that we clarify, as the Communist Manifesto does, clarify the relationship between the workers, which we refer to proletariat. Comrade Buterozini always says, Comrade Mapena, what is a proletariat? We must clarify this relationship between the workers and the party. If you are in South Africa, because of the discord in the government of national unity. What is the relationship between the party, the South African Communist Party, which is opposed to the government of national unity, and the Federation COSATU? The 10th point that we must discuss, which is linked to point number 9, is the role of a trade unions. Why should workers join a trade union? What is the benefit? So when we go to the factory, to the workplace, we go to a school, we go to hospitals, we are saying we are recruiting people to be members of a trade unions. Why should teachers in Zimbabwe join the Amalgamated Rural Teachers Union of Zimbabwe? Why should the workers in Shabani mine, if it's still there, in How mine and the other mines, join a mining union? So it's important that we clarify the role of a trade union. How does a worker benefit from being a member of a trade union? And the last point in our political education, which we must cover, is people's power. When we say amandla ngawethu, Zap will say amandla ebantwini. Of course, we'll critique their slogan later on. But the point is, when we say people's power, the people have the power. Have the power to do what? This is the point that it's important that we should pay attention to in our political education. Do the people have power to decide who is going to be their councillor? Do they have power to decide who is going to be their member of parliament? Is parliament itself a representative of the people? Because parliament, as currently constituted, being Zimbabwe and South Africa, it is a bourgeoisie institute. But we are not saying we should boycott parliament. But the point we are making, as we conclude here, is that we must define in clear terms what we mean by people's power. When we raise our fists and say, amandla ngawethu, we are saying we as the people have the power. But what is this power that we have when we do not control the decisive means of production? So in our third point on intensifying political education in what is to be done, these are the 11 points. Please write and elaborate. If you want to clarify, you are free to do so. Please like this video, subscribe to this YouTube channel. If you are on TikTok, please do follow us. Otherwise, Amandla comrades.